Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostick alongside Katie Greifeld. We're counting it down to the closing bell. And here to help take us beyond the bell. It's a global simulcast with our friends Carol Masser and Jess Menton. Welcome to our audiences across all of our Bloomberg platforms. Carol Masser, last time we spoke, it looked like we were maybe getting a bit of a rally here, but then, of course, after you last appeared, the market has gone south.
I'm so sorry, market. I had no impact on this, but I think it kind of makes sense after the week that was in the Fed meeting, and I think going into a weekend, I think people are a little bit tired, and we're kind of waiting for maybe Fed speak, economic data points, kind of what comes next. That just kind of feels about right to me.
And especially this week, the S&P 500 snapping its streak of 102 sessions without a drop of at least 1.5%. So that was its longest stretch since 2018, Katie.
Yeah, and the S&P 500 third straight week of losses. You would think I'd have a more impressive size and scope, but that happened last month too. It just feels like the wheels are maybe starting to come off a little bit here. Maybe those higher interest rates finally making themselves known to some of those equity bulls.
Yeah, and we talk about some of those key moving averages that have been broken for those technical analysts out there that are really sort of looking to that trend line. Is that trend line now, Jess, to the downside?
Yeah, definitely. And especially when you're looking at that downtrend line, if you're looking at the S&P 500 in particular, on a quarterly basis, it's on pace for its first quarterly loss actually in a year. So next week will be the final week in the third quarter.
Yeah, we should point out, of course, for the S&P 500, a down week to be sure. In fact, setting up here for what looks like it's going to be the worst week that we've seen in quite some time, erasing all of the gains for the month of September, erasing all of the gains that it had in the month of August, and erasing all of the gains that it had in the month of July. So this is a market that effectively has gone nowhere since that phenomenal run through the first 6 months. And now here on this Friday afternoon, here on September 22nd, the S&P 500 posting its worst weekly decline since March 10th. A 0.2% decline on the day, about a 3% decline on the week. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 0.3% here on the day, while the NASDAQ Composite is going to finish fractionally lower by about 0.1%. And the Russell 2000, that was your relative laggard here on the day, down 0.3%, setting up for what looks like it's going to be the fifth straight week of declines.
Yeah, a little perspective in terms of where we are in 2023. You still got a NASDAQ 100 that's up 34%, an S&P that's up about 12%. It is really the small cap universe that continues to lag, Katie. It's just up, about, 0.8% here on the year.
And if you take a look under the hood of some of these indexes, and you take a look in particular at the industry groups, there's a lot of red, there's not a lot of green for this Friday. You can see up at the top, you do have some of the chip makers, the semis, getting a little bit of love, up by 1% or so. Then some of those tech hardware names also managing to stay green. You go down the list, though, to some of the biggest losers. Banks on the day down by 1.4%, and autos off by 3.5%. Of course, Tesla is down by a not insignificant amount today, and that is weighing on the industry group overall.
All right, so let's get to some of the individual gainers. Ford Motor Company, right? We've been all focusing on the UAW, the strike out there in Detroit. GM and Stellantis now facing some walkouts at maybe as much as 38 more facilities as talks with their workers union failed to make some headway. Ford apparently, they all have different relationships with the UAW, the automakers. Ford spared the escalation after making some progress in negotiations. So Ford, it was the number 4 gainer in the S&P 500, up about 1.9%. Got to talk about Apple at its highs today, up 1.8%, still finishing the day with a gain of about 0.5%. The iPhone 15, you've also got watches going on sale today. And there was also another story late yesterday about the company giving smaller raises to its retail employees this year. So there's a lot of play, a lot of focus, but nonetheless, Apple eking out a little bit of a gain today. Don't judge me. I don't even know if you're going to bring it up, but Wayfair was up almost 5% in today's session. Bernstein coming out, raising their call on the name to market perform from underperform. Raised their price target from 65 or 265, from 60. You had Wayfair down 2%, but as I said, it was up as much as 5%, closing the day just under $60 a share. Wah, wah, wah.
I'll take the decliners. Looking over at Scholastic, so this is the children's publishing company, ticker symbol SCHL. That's down 13%. It was its worst day since March 24th of this year. If you look at that, those shares were dropping after it did report larger than expected adjusted loss per share for the latest quarter. It also flagged some seasonality issues with the sales of its education solutions unit. Another one, of course, ARM, which was the biggest IPO of the year that went public last week. Chip Designer, it was recently listed, but of course, Susquehanna actually initiated a neutral rating on the company in this note from earlier today. If you look at that stock, though, it actually fell 1.6%. And then also Deere, wanted to point that out, the world's top agricultural equipment maker there, looking at that stock today, down about 1.8%, its worst day since September 21st, so obviously yesterday. And then looking at that, Canaccord Genuity actually downgraded shares from hold to buy.
Let's talk about what went on in the Treasury space here. If you take a look at the Bloomberg Aggregate Treasury Index here, down on the week on a price basis here, continuing a trend that we've seen now for at least the past 3 weeks. Yields on a daily basis are lower, but on a weekly basis, they remain elevated. 5.1 and change right now is where we end on the 2-year. That's higher than where we were just 7 days ago. Similar story for the 10-year yield, which at one point did crack above 4.5%, now settling in today at right around 4.42. And on the longer end of the curve, you take your 30-year yield, we're at 4.5, and the 20-year at 4.7 here. And it raises a lot of questions here about the correlations that we're starting to see in the market, the positive correlation now between stocks and what's going on in treasuries, and what that means for market positioning, particularly now that that Fed meeting is out of the way, right? We got to wait till end of October before we get the next one. And we don't have a whole lot. We get some economic data over the next few days. It'll give us maybe a read on inflation here, but this is a market kind of left to its own devices with a couple of potential gray swans out there, including a government shutdown that could come at the end of next week.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it feels like we're entering into a little bit of a void. I mean, PCE, now that I've said that, we'll probably blow it out of the water, but we'll see what happens. It's interesting, though, to think about that positive correlation that has emerged, because even though you haven't seen it in the price action, I talked to a lot of people who say it's time to really step into bonds. It's time to lock in those really high rates and get comfortable with duration here. Maybe if we finally do see some relief on the yield front, they'll translate into good news for equities.
You know, it's interesting. Sylvia Jablonski over at Defiance ETFs was on with us, and she said she has seen a little bit of panic selling, certainly this week, but she says she's also seeing a lot of, what did she say, buying on the income side, outsized buying. And she said this isn't the time to be selling. This is actually an opportunity. Mind you, this is her business, but nonetheless, that when you start to see a little bit of a pullback, this is when valuations kind of come back to making a little bit more sense, certainly maybe on the equity side of things, and you can find some opportunities. She was all in on AI, right, Jess?
She was, and especially when you're thinking about the dynamic between what's happening with yields trading, especially the 10-year around the highest level since 2007, but then what that means for the equity market, in particular tech, but also unprofitable tech names. Those are the ones that are getting sold off even more so than when you're looking at those big tech counterparts.
I think it's interesting, too, when we talk about sort of where the outperformance was over the past few days here. I thought it was interesting, at least today, you had a sizable outperformance when it came to emerging market equities here. And the idea that people are still kind of on that hunt for a return, maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be the Magnificent Seven. Maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be in the bond space. There are other pockets of quote-unquote value out there if you're willing to look for them.
I was looking at what was the top gainer in the S&P 500 this week. I think it was Humana. I'm waiting for it to kind of load here.
I thought it was.
Well, that was number 2, CBO Global Markets. But it's interesting, right? You know, there are opportunities out there, and this is where you have to fundamentally do the research, right, and look at what a company's business is all about.
And it gets, you have something to say, Katie?
No, I was hoping you'd go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to talk about horses. So
No,
we're
I
going to
think
talk
you
about
should.
something else?
Yeah, no, I actually was also going to talk about
Can we talk about Tinder Select?
Well,
Who's going to pay up $500 a month for exclusive search and matching?
Swipe left on that one.
So this story is interesting, right? So for our viewers and listeners who don't know, Tinder is offering a service, an ultra premium service, Carol Masser,
Tinder
where you can pay for the very low price of $4.99. That's $499 per month, $6,000 a year, and you get special VIP features. What are these VIP?
Which they haven't said.
Right.
Yeah.
Further details to come.
$6,000
Swipe
per
up,
year.
swipe down.
Yeah, well, I
rather
think
than
I
right
don't know. I
left.
think Jess is the only one who would have use for this because I think the rest of us already have,
Yeah, I think we're all.
What is that supposed to mean?
Well,
Renee?
maybe the rest of us are married.
Single. You
Yeah.
can actually,
That's
you
all.
know.
I mean, but still, I mean, $6,000. Come on now, per year? No.
I don't know.
I don't know. Isn't that worth it? Like, to find the love of your life? Or
I'm
something
reading
else?
the article. So for $6,000 a year, just to enumerate what you could possibly get, you'll be able to access VIP search. Again, not sure what that means. Matching and conversation. So I don't know. It's cool. Someone should try it out and tell us about it.
It's not
Well,
going to be me.
Jess.
No, Jess.
Well, they're only rolling out to a very select group of people. It's just like 1% of their users there, like the power users, I guess.
Exclusive.
Right, who are like on it all the time. It sounds a little desperate.
I don't know. This is way outside of my frame of reference.
This is what
here. I
happens when
don't-
we've done a lot
This
of
is
talking.
definitely a Friday.
We go to Tinder
Yeah.
and
Meanwhile,
influencers.
there's an asteroid that's plummeting back.
Yeah, you
towards
guys
us
should
here
read about this.
With
Actually,
this is great. Did you read the story, Carol? Do you actually read?
No, yeah, I do read it.
outside Bloomberg.
I do. I love science and I love space in particular.
Well, you're going to love this. I mean, this asteroid that apparently might unlock the keys to the creation of Earth and the universe. We actually collected a sample from it like 3 years ago and been waiting for the spacecraft to make its way back into our orbit. Coming this weekend, it's going to like shoot out the sample.
It's landing in the Utah desert
desert.
on
Where all
Sunday.
the aliens are, right?
That's why
the
they chose
government
that.
doesn't keep telling us about, right?
Put it right there in Area 51 or wherever that's out there. Or is that
This is
Nevada?
real though.
The
Everyone should go
wine
Google
segment
it.
has started early.
Yes.
All right, guys. Well, asteroid or rains, have a
been
safe
fun.
weekend.
Hope
Tinder
to see you on Monday.
Select. Hope to see you on Tinder Select. Is that what you said, Katie?
No, that's
No.
All right, have a safe weekend, guys. That'll do it for our cross-platform radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We will see you on Monday.